Kevin Thompson, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I am really stoked to have you here today. I've been in your orbit for years, and I said, well, "How come I haven't pulled him in?" And here we are. It's so
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. We're going to have a great conversation today.
Yeah. So you shared this phenomenal paper napkin with me, and I think it's really important. As entrepreneurs, relationships are our most valuable asset.
Yeah.
Why did you share that with
So I honestly, I cannot even remember who I heard that from, but it was a number of years ago. It was all the way back in about 2006, 2007. So man, time flies. I mean, we're talking 18 years ago now,
me?
and I had things already happening in my life and in my business that when somebody at a seminar had mentioned that to me, I was like, oh, wow, they are totally right. That has been my experience as well. And I want to experience more of that. And at the time, I was running a publishing company and I was doing like tons of strategic partnerships through that publishing company. And just by having that mindset and being really intentional about that going forward, I mean, that publishing company, it flat out took off. And this whole thing of relationships has been such an integral piece of my life, of my business, ever since. Ever since. And yeah, like we're talking about, then we're talking like 18 years ago, and that's been on the forefront of my mind ever since.
That's amazing. So you said it was in the background before you heard it in that conference, right? And
Yeah.
then it went to the foreground. How
Yes.
did how did you how did you bring it to life? Like what do you mean that you brought it to the foreground? Well, how did you become more intentional about it given that it was already there? It was something that you'd already experienced.
So, okay, this is such a great example because at the time I heard that, I had already done a very successful strategic partnership with one of my good friends, Joe Polish. Now, I met Joe, excuse me, back in 1995, 96, when at the time I owned a cleaning and restoration company that was really struggling. And I found an article from him in a trade publication. I ended up ordering information from him, ended up joining his coaching program, attending his seminars, and over the course of the next 3 years, he helped me completely transform that business. And in 2000, we started this website as an extension of that business called Get Mold Solutions, probably one of the ugliest websites on the internet. But by 2003, that website was producing about 15,000 a month for the business. And in the
In
spring
'03, in 2003.
in 2003, yes, yeah. And so Joe and I were talking in the spring of that year, and he's like, "Hey, he's like, why don't you come down here to the annual event in November and show everybody what you're doing with your website?" And I'm like, "All right," I said, "I can do that." And he's like, "And before you come, be sure to document what you do and how you do it and put it into a course because a certain percentage of the folks, once they hear from you, they're going to want your help and just make sure you're available and ready to give them that help." He's like, "Does that work for you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that totally works for me." And so we did that in November of that year. I spoke at his annual event. I had never spoken public before. So I mean, there was like zero experience. It was all from the heart and just wanting to do right by Joe and do right by the people in that room. But long story short, at the end of that presentation, which was probably about, I don't know, 50, 60 minutes, I just simply said, "Hey, if what I shared resonates with you, if you feel like I might be able to help you, I would be totally honored to do that. Here's what that looks like, and here's what the investment is." And we ended up making $35,000 in sales of that course. And I'll tell you, that was more money by a long shot than I made in a day running the cleaning business. And at the time, I could not articulate this, but by a couple of years later, I totally could because that was the very first strategic partnership I ever did. which was with Joe. And looking back on that experience, having conversations with Joe, having conversations with other people, I really came to realize that, Joe and I did not have this conversation around, hey, we should do this thing together, Kev. You should come down here and you should put a course together and you should sell it, because if you do, we're going to make a ton of money together. We never had that conversation. He knew that I had something that I was doing that was working well, and he wanted me to come share with his people because he knew that in doing that, it would help further the relationship that he already had with those people and stuff. He knew that by me sharing, those that it resonated with and wanted my help, they could invest in that help. And also, if he would have thought for 1 second that putting me in front of those people would have in any way damaged the relationship that he had with everybody in that audience, he would have never put me there, because no amount of money, no result would have been worth damaging the relationship that he had with those people. And so, that happened. That whole experience happened in November of 2003, well, from April to November. And after the fact, when I heard this thing about relationships are our most valuable asset, I was like, wow, that is totally right. That is the experience that I had with Joe. If not for Joe and the relationship that I already had with him, that he just knew, okay, Kevin's got something of value here, and if he comes and shares with my people, that's going to be a really good thing. And so just looking at that from that perspective, I have gone on to do hundreds and hundreds of strategic partnerships since then. And I have always focused on how can I be of service to my partner? How can I help them further the relationship that they already have with the people that their business serves? And so it's taken on a whole different light because of this way of thinking.
That's awesome. There's a lot to unpack there, Kev. So I want to go back, right? 2003. I just like context, guys, everybody. 2003, I'm pretty sure they spelled SAS and MRR with the letters BS when you had 15K, right? I mean, that was not a thing back then. So you were already churning pretty good MRR in a time when people weren't talking about it in those terms, right? I mean, you built a pretty good business at that stage. So let's not take that away. But in one day, due to the relationship leverage, you did 35K, which was 2+ months, right? Of that MRR. Like you just really bumped that up right away, which is pretty spectacular, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that would have never happened if not for the relationship with Joe. And in turn, all the relationship that he had with all those folks who were in attendance at that event.
Yeah, that's profound. That's profound. So so that's the first strategic partnership, but that was in 2003. Now we're up to 2006. We're 3 years later, and you get this sort of context around, oh my gosh, this is the way this whole thing works. This is the way the relationship comes together. And I need to be more intentional about this. And you put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds together. But here's the thing that I have a question about is, with this question of how can I be service to my partner, have you ever said no to a strategic partnership? Like, what's your filter? How does that work? Tell me about that.
So if me and somebody that I'm partnering with do not subscribe to the same kinds of core values, it's definitely not going to be. So in the joint venture world, there are lots of people selling all kinds of stuff that their number one criteria for success is how much money did we make and how fast did we make it, Mm-hmm. And the challenge with it, I'm not against making money. I mean, I believe 100% that the more value that we provide to others, the more we should be compensated for that. And of course, being broke never helps nobody. I'm all about getting compensated well for our efforts. But the money conversation, when the focus is on that, and the conversation about the end user and how they're going to benefit is not taking place, well, there's a disconnect there and stuff. And so if there's a disconnect there, I have to say no, because we don't have the same core values. And you know what? No harm, no foul. That's totally fine. But if we don't subscribe on core values, it just doesn't make sense to proceed any further.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting about the way you're phrasing that is a lot of times people look at that conversation and they say, "Hey, you're not right for me." But I think you're saying it the other way around. I'm not right for you. If you're focused on the dollar and you're willing to do anything for it and you're not focused on the relationship, I'm not the right guy for you
Yeah.
because I'm focused on value to the relationship. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. And
Was that hard to learn? Because like when you're growing your business, I mean, for a lot of entrepreneurs, when you're growing your business, like saying no to dollars is hard, right?
yeah, and that that whole thing got easier for me because outside of my business, my wife and I, we have 7 kids. We currently have 6 grandkids. So I am, father and grandfather. And I have intentionally structured my business for many years so that it fits in with the lifestyle that I want to be able to live, and being a husband and father first, so that I can also be the entrepreneur that I want to be. And so in doing that, and in being focused on that, I did not have any problem whatsoever saying no to potential revenue opportunities if it was not in alignment with that. And even with like working on weekends and stuff, I don't work on weekends. That is my family's time. That is devoted to them. And so even when somebody would suggest that, hey, Kev, why don't we make time to talk next Saturday or whatever? I'm like, well, that's not going to work for me. What's the next weekday that will work best for you? And it's really easy to do that. But I've always been focused on that. And yes, have I lost out on revenue opportunities? Absolutely. I totally have. But what I have found in my experience is when we just stay in alignment with who we are and how we want to show up and what feels right for us, yeah, we might miss out on some opportunities, but more opportunities will open the way for us as well.
And then
And
somewhere else, somebody's going to be listening to that. Is there a weekday that works for you? Right. And they're going to hear that because maybe that's one of their values too. And they're saying, Kevin's speaking my language. We're simpatico here. Right. And people pick up on those little pieces of string. And if anybody's listening right now and not on the YouTube, behind Kevin, there's like finger paintings and hand paintings and prints and pictures of, hooked on daddy and pictures of family everywhere behind you. And so again, your priority is clear, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's obvious what's most important to you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's really cool. So let's talk about this. There's 2 parts of it, right? You said, Joe was really confident because he knew that you were going to bring value to his relationships. But, sometimes we bring people in and they don't bring value or they damage that relationship. How do you handle that? Has that ever happened to you?
Totally. It hasn't happened a lot, but on occasion it does happen. And in fact, the last time that it happened was in the spring of 2021, that I had brought a gentleman who owned a pretty large company, actually, into my world. And he was actually his company was getting a lot of business out as a result of that. And they were having some challenges internally. And so they weren't delivering on promises made and what people were paying them for. And I had reached out to I knew they were having some challenges because he had shared that with me. But I was like, hey, I'm getting people talking about that are investing with you, saying that they're not getting any workflow from you and stuff, and and so can we make time to figure this out? And he didn't want to talk about it, and I had to make the decision to cut him loose. And I will tell you that in that, I mean, because there was a lot of money that had been invested in his company by about 6 or 7 different other people and companies. And so, for me, it really did weigh heavy on me for a period of time. I mean, and we can be our own worst critic sometimes, and I was definitely beating myself up on that one. Like, man, how could you not see that coming? Or you must have really messed up through the vetting process, and you let them into your world, because look what happened, and now you've damaged all these relationships. And the reality was, once I started talking with those people who had been impacted by that, there was not one single one of them that had a damaged relationship. They all were like, Kev. I mean, one guy told me, he's like, Kev, he's like, people are going to be people, man. You cannot foresee everything. You are putting your best foot forward and doing what you do. And once you found out what was going on, you handled it. You did all that you could do. And so, Kev, he's like, this hasn't changed anything between you and I, because I know your intention. And when people just know who we are, and we just consistently show up that way, because, I mean, how can we show up any other way than who we are? you
Yeah.
know? And when we just show up that way, people over time, they know who we are and what we're all about. And yeah, we might make a mistake here and there, or things might happen that might be a little bit out of our control, but it's how we respond to that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I love that story, because I think a lot of people don't do that because they're afraid if something goes wrong, but they're not also holding the door open for something to go really right either.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and not necessarily right for them, but right for somebody else, like right for, this downstream relationship that you have and this other partner that you have, and you might be able to put them together in a really great way, but people sit on their hands, I think, sometimes,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're afraid. So
Totally.
so you're saying don't be afraid about it. Do your best. Do your best all the time, and that's good enough, right? Is that what I was hearing?
Exactly, because like I said, it's people will know our intentions. I mean, I have relationships spanning back well, Joe was my very first ever business relationship, and so we started that relationship in 1995. So we're talking, that's been
29
29
years.
years ago. So I have got relationships spanning back 28, 29 years at this point, business relationships. And those people, they know who I am. They know, well, I like to think pretty much anybody who knows me, maybe newer relationships that haven't had the longevity yet. But I think even new relationships, because I always strive to give them an experience first, they kind of get a feel very quickly that, like, this guy's for real, this guy's the real deal, kind of a thing. But definitely, these relationships going back, 15, 20, 25 years, they know hands down that I would never do anything to intentionally damage the relationship that we already have.
Yeah.
Anything that I do is, I want to further the relationship that I already have with Joe, that I already have with whoever that is. And I would never make an introduction for them. I would never connect them with somebody that, if I thought for 1 second doing so would damage the relationship that we already have. And they just know that. They just know that.
So sometimes I hear this thing also, where people say, no, people spend too much time in networking, because what they're doing is they're talking about stuff all the time with other people that are never really in they're not in their business. And so what they do is they say, oh, that's not for me. I'm not going to do that. What do you say to those people?
so that totally can happen. And I am, so I'll give you an example. I was brought in to speak with a friend of mine invited me in to speak for his mastermind group and stuff. And a number, the majority of the people in that group were not an ideal fit for me and the work that I do or anything. They would probably never become clients or anything. But yet, my goal was to serve the host of that group. That is my goal. And to help him further the relationship that he already has with all of his people. And so what I want at the end of that, my goal was not to get new clients or anything like that. It was to further the relationship that I have with the host of the group, help him further his relationship, and have his people going back to him going, wow, thanks so much for having Kevin share. That's what I want to have happen.
Yeah.
And regardless of, in fact, I don't think any of those people will become clients of mine or anything. I have had follow-up conversations with some of those people because they just wanted to talk. They really resonated with what we talked about on that call. And but I don't worry about, am I going to get clients from this? Because the right clients, they just show up when, I have processes in place. I host these virtual roundtables and all that, and I'm really intentional about who I invite. And so I have processes in place for that kind of thing. But the right clients, they show up in right timing and stuff when we just be us.
So, it sounds so easy, right? Just be us. But there's a real strong intentionality to everything you're saying. You're very purposeful. You're very intentional, and I think that your style is very laid back, which makes people think that you're not being as intentional as you are. But you're really intentional about everything. How even having the focus that you're going to be serving the host, and you're not worried about everybody else. But as long as the host is well served, your intention is fulfilled. Being clear about that's really important. What do you do for maintaining that intentionality when there's a whole bunch of pressure and noise on top of you?
So I want to be careful how I say this. So right now, as I get compensated by, I am a connector for entrepreneurs, but what my real role is being the conduit of trust for them. That's my real role, because when entrepreneurs reach a certain level of success, the circle of people around them that they can truly trust and confide in gets extremely small. And so my goal is, I want to be in that group for the right entrepreneurs. I want to be one of those people. I had one of my guy. He used to be a venture capital guy. He's not anymore. Now him and 7 of his buddies, they run a private investment fund and stuff. But he used to be a venture capital guy, and I've known him for 13 years. And I am at the place with him where anybody that I would recommend that he has a conversation with, he will do that. Anybody I bring into his world, because he's like, Kev, he's like, I know that you would never risk the relationship that we already have. And anybody that you would suggest I should have a call with, I will do that just because it came from you. And you are one of only 3 people that hold that kind of a spot in my life. And when he articulated that to me, I was just like, that really helped me, because I was like, that's the spot I want to hold for people like him and stuff. Because by doing so, the impact that I get to have in this world has expanded so much because I have really discovered who I am most valuable to. And so anything I can do to serve him and people like him, that's who I want to serve, because that's how I'm going to make my biggest impact. That's where the connections are most valuable, is to people who are already making a substantial impact in the world through their businesses and stuff. And I just want to help them expand that impact that they're making.
It's really powerful. And what it sounds like, you're that laser focus on who you want to be makes it clearer. I don't want to say easier, but clearer about, this is where I need to spend my time and this is where I don't spend my time during my work days, during the time that I have to work. Is that right?
And it's like, and I can, so I don't have any problem saying who the guy was that I was talking about earlier. It's Brian Kurtz, and I shared with his Titans Accelerator group recently. And Brian is somebody that I've known for many years. I actually met Brian through Joe years ago when Brian spoke at one of Joe's events for the cleaning and restoration industry. So I've known Brian almost as long as I've known Joe. And Brian is one of those guys that I connected him and Perry Marshall 12 years ago. That was the first introduction that I made for two guys that they went on to do so much amazing things together that it got me thinking, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could have a business where you just got to do that all the time? And that seed was planted 12 years ago. And now here it is today, and like, that's reality. That's what I get to do these days and stuff. And it just keeps getting better and better. And so, by focusing on serving those entrepreneurs, I also get to serve other entrepreneurs, because Brian has a lot of really awesome entrepreneurs in his world that might not be an ideal client for me, but by coming from this place of service, Brian was so grateful for what took place on that call and stuff, that he was messaging me after. He's like, man, Kev, you just totally nailed it. Thank you so much for what you shared, and everybody really appreciated it. And like, that furthered the relationship that I already had with Brian, and that also helped Brian further the relationship that he had with all of his people. And I'm going to tell you what, there's nothing but good that can come from that kind of stuff, and being of service to the right entrepreneurs.
I've noted this down a few times during our conversation. You talk about being of service, being of service, being of service, right? And I think that's a really great filter, not just for you, but it's one that you obviously use really rigorously, because that helps you say no when you can't be of service. I can't serve you, right? I mean, you're asking for a plate that I don't have, and
that's right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. I think that's a really great place to leave it, because that's a really great tool for entrepreneurs listening to pick up and use. Can you be of service to your audience? And if you can't, and you can't definitively 100% answer that, then maybe it's best to say no, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. That is the filter that I use. That is the filter I use when I'm deciding if I can really help somebody as a client or not. And so when we do have that clarity, and a lot of times, if I'm not the right person to help somebody, I can maybe refer them to somebody else who is a better fit for them and stuff. But it just helps really when we have that clarity on who is the ideal person that we can serve, and anybody who's not that person, there's no harm, no foul, and we can just say, I'm not the best person to serve you at all, and it's okay. It's okay to say no.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Kevin, thank you for serving our community. Thank you for saying yes for this. This was such a joy. And I look forward to spending more time with you in the future.
Same.